with the increasing levels of electromagnetic pollution, radiation exposure in everyday life is quickly becoming a very important subject in relation to health in general, but is especially important for and often greatly underestimated by those trying to conceive, pregnant, or with young children. So although I was aware of the issues in relation to health and fertility, I had very little to offer in terms of solutions. And I know from my work and training in fertility that radiation can have a detrimental effect on fertility and pregnancy outcomes and should be avoided. Could you perhaps elaborate on some of the research that is available linking household radiation to health issues?
There's plenty of research to demonstrate that there's health effects from non-ionizing radiation, which people are easily exposed to in their homes or in the car or at work. Non-ionizing radiation, by the way, is the difference with ionizing radiation is that ionizing radiation is produced like X-rays and those sorts of things, where non-ionizing radiation comes more from appliances and cables and communication sources. There's lots of research on low-frequency electromagnetic fields, which can be found in cars, in homes from internal power cables, or more frequently from power supply cables running to the house or even past the house, regardless if they're hanging over the pavement or if they're buried under the ground, like they are in the newer suburbs. This radiation has been linked, for example, to the hormone melatonin being blocked in its natural anti-cancer action. And for those who don't realize it, all our bodies make about 10,000 cancer cells a day. They need to be identified and eliminated. And this research shows that an electromagnetic field of just 2 milligauss or more has that effect. Milligauss, by the way, is an expression of strength of electromagnetic field. The lowest radiation-producing car, for example, that I've ever tested was a Volkswagen, and even in there, in a driver's seat, it was still 4 to 5 milligauss. So, far over what that research showed. If you have dimmer switches or dimmer lights in your home, it's very likely that you're producing an electromagnetic field that's 8 milligauss in that area where the lights are in. Equally, solar panels can produce similar radiation. Depending on where they're placed. There are also multiple studies clearly linking this type of radiation with infertility in men and sperm quality reduction. And just have a think about that for a moment. A study showed that exposure to 1.6 milligauss of electromagnetic field doubled the likelihood of sperm abnormalities, and of course things got worse from there on. So you are less likely to get pregnant. And if you manage to get pregnant, there's a chance that the quality of the DNA that sperm cell contributed wasn't quite as good as it should have been. As you mentioned earlier to listeners, sperm cells take about 3-4 months to mature. So elimination and avoidance of radiation exposure for the fathers-to-be should really start 4 months of preconception care. Other research in animals brought the researchers to the conclusion that electromagnetic field exposure might impair the female reproductive potential by reducing the capacity of the follicles to reach a developmental stage. Other research showed that blood pressure is being affected by electronic pollution, and that just opens up the whole debate that perhaps these unnatural signals of radiation keep triggering our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight and flight response. And if that is the case, then that could that could explain why so many people in our culture are having digestive issues and nutritional deficiencies, because the sympathetic nervous system raises blood pressure and slows the digestion. In our home assessments, we measure, for example, for electric fields in the bed, and I can tell you that in 90% of homes, people have that radiation coursing through them all night long. If the theory is correct about the sympathetic nervous system, and that could certainly explain quite a lot. Luckily, this type of radiation can be completely eliminated by special switches that we get electricians to install on certain circuits that are in the house. Finding out which circuits are responsible, that's the tricky part, and that's why an assessment is an absolute must. What else can I touch on? Mobile phones are linked to behavioral problems in children. Radio frequency radiation exposure before and after birth was linked to dramatic increases to the occurrences of autism spectrum disorders in children. Childhood leukemia linked to environmental electronic pollution multiple times. A study among female physical therapists who were using radio and microwave frequency devices for heating purposes, that research showed that 47.7% experienced miscarriage prior to the 7th week, compared to 14.5% of the non-exposed women. I mean, that difference is enormous. And lastly, as I'm sure you know, electric blankets and heated water beds have been directly linked to miscarriages and fetal growth changes.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and I always advise my fertility clients to not use them. So, in your opinion, what should couples do who want to get pregnant, are currently pregnant, or have young children?
I'll give a few hands-on tips on what people can easily do to reduce some of the radiation exposure. We'll do that a little later, but I believe that taking serious action is important for anyone, but especially those troubled by chronic illness. Those who are fit, healthy, and would like to keep it that way, and those that want to conceive, are pregnant, and those who have young children. In the environment that we live in today, everyone should really have their homes assessed for residential radiation. It's just so easy to be exposed to it. And take basically whatever steps are required to make it a healthier home. In our opinion, the bedroom is extremely important in this. The bedroom is the place where your body is supposed to rest and regenerate. And if you can make that bedroom a radiation-free haven for your body to truly rest and regenerate without the constant burden of radiation from wiring in your walls, microwave signals from the mobile phone towers, and electromagnetic fields from power supply cables or appliances, if you can do that, then you will be so much stronger and so much more resilient to cope with the other 16 hours of radiation exposure that we're now so used to in our daytime hours. In today's world, it's just not enough to have a house that just protects you from the cold, the heat, the rain, and the burglars. You need it to be a healthy place, and you need it to shield you from radiation, not add to it.
Maybe if you could just explain in brief how you can reduce exposure to radiation with the solutions you have.
Okay, well, first of all, in an assessment, we go for a walk through the living room areas, the studies, the home office, and we give some pointers on how to reduce exposure by moving or removing certain radiation sources. In the bedroom, we assess for high-frequency radiation levels from sources like mobile phone towers, Wi-Fi, or the Wi-Fi of the neighbors, cordless phones, smart meters, baby monitors, airport navigation systems, and so on. We also figure out which circuits are responsible for electric fields that we find often coursing through the bed, and we assess for excessive natural sources of radiation as well. For the electric fields, we can use special switches that will actually cut the power to a circuit when you don't require electricity. By doing this, the wire in the wall is effectively dead, and the electric fields that those cables generate would then normally be completely eliminated.
And moving on, Patrick, with smart meters are very topical at the moment. Can you please comment on them?
Smart meters are basically the modern version of the meter box, I suppose. They're a source of high-frequency radiation as they frequently communicate with each other and the power company via radio waves. Now, there are issues with increased power bills. There's privacy issues with them, but it also seems that that they affect about 5% of people on a health level, and 20% of people are moderately sensitive to it. Now, even a smart meter on the neighbor's house has been shown to affect people in the house next door. Issues like headaches, ringing ears, poor sleep quality, lack of energy, muscle tension are very common.